Aha. Didn't push a button. I should have pushed.
Got to start over?
Yeah, let's start over. We'll, now that one I think is working, but this one wasn't.
All right.
You're who?
I'm Grover Crum, and I was born in 1922 out at Twitchell, Texas. And when I was 5 years old, we started to dig a basement and build a new house. And we didn't have bulldozers and stuff to dig a basement like we do now. And we used teams of horses and Fresnos and walking plows. And they started digging the basement with 2 teams of horses and plows, and had got down about 2 feet. And I had walked out there. I was only 5 years old, and I walked out there to watch them. And they started turning out Indian skulls. And so I went and started picking them up and setting them up on a ridge of dirt and cleaning out the eye sockets and everything and getting them cleaned up pretty good. I had about 12 of them lined up, and everything was going along good. I was having lots of fun. And here came my dad on the saddle horse up to see how I was getting along digging the basement. And when he saw those Indian skulls and me over there cleaning out their eye sockets and stuff, that's when things turned bad. After he got through with me, I had to take all the Indians back and put them where I thought I'd picked them up. And then they had the fellas come in and put all the dirt back, and we moved to another spot to start digging the basement, because he said that was probably an Indian burial ground, and he didn't want to build a house on the Indian burial ground. And then later on in about, I guess 1936 or 7, the price of bones went up, and they told us to gather all the bones they could and haul them in here to Perryton and sell them to them, and they shipped them someplace to make bone meal or fertilizer out of. And so we'd take wagons and go out and gather buffalo skulls and buffalo heads with the horns on and the bones and put in the wagons. And a lot of people wouldn't realize that there was that many of them still laying around in 1936 or 7, buffalo skulls and bones laying. Of course, we'd take lots of bones from cows and horses that had died, and any place we could find, and to try to make a little bit of money.
What year was that?
1936, probably.
Okay.
And I don't know why the price of bones went up so high, but they just loaded boxcar loads here in Perryton of them.
How about that?
And, but pretty quick while it was over, and they didn't gather any more up. But down where the David Wilson lived, right on the edge of the Cap Rock where it dropped off to the Canadian River, why there was a place where the cattle had went down before it was fenced off or anything, and a snowstorm had came and driven them over the side of the bank, and he went down and showed us, and there was just wagon loads of bones down there where those cattle
got trapped.
fell over, and before they finally built a big fence, called it a drift fence, to keep them from cattle from going over the bank in the snowstorm.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been lots of changes since then.
Well, tell me about your folks and your family.
I have, my folks came here in probably 1917 or 18. They bought the land out here in 1919 and moved out by Twitchell. And I had 3 sisters and then 4 brothers.
What were your parents' names?
My folks' name was M.H. and Susie Crum.
M.H. and Susie?
Yes.
Okay. And your sisters?
My sisters was Edith was the oldest, and Beulah and Bess. They were the three oldest children. And Edith passed away a few years ago. She was 99. Bess passed away this about a month ago, and she was 98. And my brothers are all living except one. My oldest brother passed away, but I have one that's 96, and one that's 94, and one that's 92, and then myself, and I'll be 90 pretty quick.
What are your brothers' names?
The oldest one was Norman,
Really?
and Joe was the next one, and Ben was the middle one, and Jack was the one just older than me, and then come down to Grover. I
Big
was
family.
named, Grover Brillhart came by right after the snowstorm, and on his horse, and rode up and stopped for a cup of coffee. And he said, "I heard you had a new baby." He said, "Yes, he's over there in the basket." So he went over and looked at him, and he said, "What's his name?" And he said, "We haven't named him yet." And he said, "Well, if you'll let me name him, why, I'll give him a horse as soon as he's big enough to ride." So they said, "Well, that'll be all right." So he said, "Just call him Grover."
Isn't
So
that
that's
great?
the way I got
Good
named.
story. That's a great story.
And I just, oh, shut up.
No. You were here during the Dust Bowl days. Tell me about how you fared during that.
Well, during the Dust Bowl days, all of us in this part of the country probably fared a lot better than anyone had thought. We had everything we needed except money. There just wasn't any of that around. But we did have all the food we could eat. We raised big gardens and had to carry the water to water it because we didn't have electric pumps and that to water a garden. So we had to carry it in a bucket from the tanks to water the garden plants. But we raised lots of green beans, lots of corn, even popcorn we'd raised. So we'd have popcorn in the wintertime. And raised beets and carrots and then canned all of it for use in the wintertime. So we had all good food all the time. We raised pigs and butchered them and cured the ham, so we had plenty of bacon and ham, and butchered bees. And at that time we didn't have refrigeration, so we'd hang the quarters of beef up in the windmill tower, and we could leave it up there all winter and just let it down as we needed it and slice off some meat. And today, if you tried to do that, well, you'd have a hot day in the middle of the winter and it'd all spoil in about a week. But it
Amazing,
stayed
isn't
cold all winter back then, and that's the way we did. And then for meat in the summertime, why, they would fry down the meat and hamburger and everything and put it in 5-gallon cans, and they'd put down a layer of meat and then pour in some pork grease, and it'd turn into lard, and then put down some more hamburger patties and keep on till they got the bucket clear full. And in the summertime, why, you could go to the basement and just take out whatever you needed, and we had meat during the summer that way. And it was a whole different world. But we did have everything but money, so we'd bring in our cream and eggs and use that to buy our whatever groceries we needed in town, or wanted, or I guess clothing or gloves or stuff like that also.
Yeah.
Grover, tell them about selling prairie squirrel.
Okay. I would walk over to the railroad. We used to have a passenger train that came into Perry, and be right along with the freight train, but had passenger cars on, 3 or 4 for passenger cars, and then they had one that had the dining car and had one or two Pullman cars for them to sleep in. So I'd walk over by the railroad track, and they'd see me down there when the engineer come by, so he'd slow the train down and bring it to a stop when it got back to the dining car, and the conductor would open the door to see what I wanted. And if you wanted to ride to town, well, you could get on, he'd take me on into Perryton. But I didn't want to do that. I usually had some stuff to sell them, and I'd sell them cottontails. I'd dress cottontails and sell them cottontails for 50 cents a piece. I'd sell them prairie dogs, and he paid me 75 cents a piece for them. And I'd sell him buttermilk sometimes. When we'd had it, I'd take over a gallon or so of buttermilk and take him over pounds of butter. And he bought it all from me. Anytime I was there, they'd stop the train. And I asked him, I said, "What do you do with those prairie dogs?" And he said, we call them prairie squirrels, he said, and they're the highest thing on our menu when we sell them to the customers on the train.
Really?
And said, "We'll take all of them you can get." I just bring them on.
Prairie squirrels. How beautiful.
Instead of calling them prairie dogs, they call them prairie squirrels.
He wouldn't sell to you as prairie dogs, would they? Well, you must have had milk cows and everything too,
yes.
didn't you?
Each one of us boys had to milk 2 cows. And the oldest ones got to milk theirs first, and then they could go to the house and get ready to go to school. And then the next 2 would milk theirs, and so they could go. And then I was the last one, so I had to milk mine last. Then when I got there with the milk, why, it had to be separated, so I had to stay and separate the milk, and they was already getting ready for school.
Yeah, that was a
And,
job, separating milk.
If I made it in time for school, I was real lucky. Because after I separated it, I had to carry the milk back out to the bucket-fed calves and to the hogs, and so it was just too much to do after I got through. I think they could have separated part of it before I got there, or else been cleaned up and come and helped me so I could went and got ready for school, but they didn't do that.
But they left it on you, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, how did you get to school?
We had to walk to school or ride a horse, but most of the time we rode a horse even when he was real small.
Did you go from Twitchell into Perryton?
No, we'd go from Twitchell. I had the Twitchell school, a little country school there.
Okay, okay.
And at one time there was about 35 kids there, but when I went there was probably about 20 or 21 or 2. And we'd go to the 7th grade, and then we had to go to Perryton to school after we got to 7th grade.
Was there a bus then to go to school?
Yes, they started running the bus, and we had to furnish the fuel, so many 55-gallon barrels of gas for the bus driver to get him to come to the house, or we had to walk a mile to meet the bus. And so we always bought a barrel or 2 of gas so he'd come on down to the house and pick us up.
Yeah. Well, what about World War II? You remember all the things that happened around then, I bet you.
Yes, when World War II started, well, before it started, right after 1941, why, they took my oldest brother, Joe, and he was in the Air Force, and he went to India and France and all over there. Then my brother Ben, they took him, and he got in the Air Force, and he was in about a year and a half, and they operated on him, and he went blind, and was blind for almost a year, and so they kept him in the hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska. When he finally got to when he could see, why, they turned him loose and let him come home and discharged him. But while he was there, he met a nurse, and they're in the hospital, and so right after he got out of the hospital, he married this little nurse that had taken care of him while he was there in Lincoln, and they spent their life together.
What was the blindness caused by the operation?
Yes, they'd cut his optical nerves. So,
But he got
they
some
finally
sight
grew back together and got.
No
back
kidding.
now.
Well, that's amazing. I've still got some hope then. To one of my eyes. Well, when the war broke out, did you know where Japan was?
No, well,
Or Pearl
one
Harbor?
thing about it, when in the country schools and everything, we'd each one had a row we sat in, the first grade and the second grade and the third. So we'd listen to all the other grades as they studied through school. Time we got up to be the seniors, we'd heard the answers to the questions so many times we knew about where everybody was. Cause we
Maybe they need to re-implement that system.
We'd
I
listen
agree.
to them the spelling and everything, and time we just little fellas, well, we could spell the big ones because we'd listen to them spell up there so long we knew how to spell all of it.
Good point. Good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, right. Well, how about your family? How many kids do you have, and where are they? And
I married a little girl I met in high school named Cleo Faye Turner, and we got married after I got out of the Army in 1943, in September of 43. And we have 4 children, a boy, Gary, and a daughter, Nancy, and then another daughter, Connie, and another boy, Michael, and 4 children. And we have 10 grandchildren, and I expect there's 14
No, about 16.
or 15 or 16 great grandchildren. It's hard to keep track of them.
yeah, they kind
One of
of
them just-
proliferate, don't they?
Yeah, one of them just a year old and a little tiny.
But they're a lot of fun
Yes.
for us
They
older
really
ones.
are.
Do they live around here?
One of them, my boy, I sent him off to college and thought he'd sure come back and help me farm and ranch. And when he got through college, well, he met a girl from Houston and went to Houston, and he's still in Houston. He never came back. And my daughter then,
Nancy.
oldest daughter, Nancy, she married a boy from Derzett. We'd moved to Derzett and bought a grocery store over there, and lived there and sent all the kids, and they all graduated from Derzett High School. And she married a boy from over at Derzett, Laverne Wynette, and she still lives between Booker and Derzett, about halfway between Booker and Derzett. And then my next daughter married a boy over by Derzett and moved to Colorado, and they live at South Fork, Colorado. And my youngest boy started working in the oil field when he was about, right after he got out of high school. And he's been in there ever since, and he's flow hand on an oil well. But
In this area?
he's down by
Right, no.
Wheeler,
Right.
yes, but he's in the oil field down by Wheeler and Kelton right now. And it's real funny when he first started in there, why he was working for a crew that painted tanks and repaired the oil field tanks and stuff. And they was out there, and whenever they worked on one, if they had to get in there with a torch, where there's so many gas fumes and stuff, that they'd back up and put the exhaust pipes of their pickups into the tanks and let them run a while to kill all of that oxygen, take all the oxygen and stuff out of there, so before they could light a acetylene torch to cut holes to put valves and stuff in the sides of the tanks. So they had one all ready to go, and the welder got in there and was gonna strike his acetylene torch and get ready to cut the hole. And so my son got a big sledgehammer and was on the outside, and just when he lit the torch, why, he drew back and hit the side of that tank just as hard as he could with that sledgehammer. Well, the welder thought sure the whole thing had blew up. And my boy took off down across the pasture running as hard as he could, and the welder come out of the tank and after him. And that was the way he started in the oil field. It hasn't got too much better since.
Sounds like a joker.
But he has lots of fun.
Yeah, right. Sounds like it. Well, what do you remember about some of the bad weather storms we've had?
Well, we had lots of real bad snowstorms, and we had lots different kind of winters than we have now. Now we just get little tiny snows and everything, and back then we had snow for 2 or 3 days before it stopped and blow, and you just stayed in and couldn't feed the cattle or anything till it got through, because then you'd go break the ice and so they could get a drink and feed them all. But one in 1938, we had a big blizzard came and had snow drifts on Main Street here as big as top of an automobile. And
Seen pictures of that.
my oldest brother was living in a apartment, and it was up on the 2nd floor. So he phoned and said, "Would you come in and help me get out of my house?" And I said, "What's the matter? Can't you get out?" And he said, "Not unless I jump out the top window." He said, "It's packed snow clear up on the screen door and on the door till we can't get the door open to get out." And wanted me to come and shovel the dirt away, and
Sure.
it would have been taller than my head was. So I told him to just jump out the window up there, and then he could dig himself out. But when he jumped out the window, he went down the snow, so he couldn't hardly get out to go get a shovel.
Well, we had a big snow that I remember in the late 40s, in the mid 40s, I guess, 45.
There was one in 43,
57.
43, the year we got married.
43.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 43.
Oh, yeah,
That was
43
the
and
bad
44,
one,
it
the
stayed
bad
all
bad.
winter, just never.
Because we got married and we didn't see the ground until April.
Yeah,
They-
that was the biggest snow I saw. I wasn't here for that 57 one.
It started snowing the first part of December, and just kept snowing and blowing, and all during that time. And I believe that was the worst storm I have ever seen. And I'm almost as old as he is.
We had a lot of cattle during the winter of 43 and 44, and I had a lot of shock feed out in the field, but we hadn't hauled it in and stacked too much of it because we was going to feed it out of the shocks. And it started snowing and snowed till just barely the top of the shocks of feed would stick out of the snow, and it froze it down to the ground. So when we went out to load it, we'd have to run over it with we'd fixed a big sled, 8 feet wide and 16 foot long. We pulled with horses or 2 tractors. We could have one lug tractor and one rubber tired tractor, and we could pull it with them. But we'd have to run over the shocks of feed to break them loose before we could load them on this sled to haul them in to feed the cattle. And
Froze to the ground.
it'd take all day long to feed them all.
Well, how much land did you all farm? You remember?
Altogether, they was about a little over 2,000 acres.
Oh, that's a good size.
Part of it was land that my uncle owned, and I had 2 uncles, and we farmed both of their farms, and then what my dad had. So we had quite a lot of farmland.
Mm. How do you relate to the modern farm methods? you've seen change over the years?
Well, there's lots of difference to what it was then. We had started plowing on a section of land, 640 acres, and with the old John Deere tractors and a 10-foot one-way, the most you could get if you went 12 or 14 hours a day was about 40 acres a day. So at 40 acres a day, it would take you a long time before you got around the 640 acres. One time we started plowing and we wanted to cut the field too, so we'd have 320 acres, but they said no, just plow around the whole thing. And by the time we got to the center and got it all plowed, it had rained a time or two, and the weeds at the outside of the field had came up again and was up 2 or 3 feet high by the time we got to the center and got the
You
first
just
plow.
started over.
So we went to the outside and started over. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, old John Deere tractors in one way is,
We had hire out and run the tractors for ourselves and for other neighbors, and we'd get $1 a day. And I got to figuring up the other day how much we really was making. Part of the time we was making 6 cents an hour, and part of the time, if they worked us like 14 or 15 hours, we wasn't even making 6 cents an hour. And we didn't have a cab, we didn't have air conditioners, we was out in the sun.
didn't have a decent seat either.
Had a steel seat to ride on. I just don't think it was quite fair.
That's great. Yeah, did y'all go to the parade just now?
Yes,
What do you think of those tractors?
they were sure different to what we had.
Weren't they beautiful things? Need a ladder to get in those.
Oh, boy.
Well, what would you like to tell your future viewers, people that are gonna follow us someday?
Well, first I'd like to tell them that they don't need to think about moving someplace else where it's better, because right now they're living in the best place probably in the United States. We have the best air to breathe, and we have the best people. We went for years and years and years and never locked the door on the house, whether we went on vacation or what we done. And today it's almost the same. We don't have that much crime or anything. And when it comes to the recession and everything that we're having now, I expect right here in Perryton, Texas, and in our locale, it has bothered us the least of any place in the country. And when they talk about going to a better place, why, they're probably there right now. And I've talked to several people, and they said they'd go on a vacation, and I'd say, well, how did you like it all? Well, I was glad when I got back home. It was the best place I've been.
Great, good thing. Well, anything else you'd like to tell us about?
Well, that's probably enough for one time. If I get some more time on my hands, I'll come back and tell you some more.
Well, yeah, call us up, and call me, or you can call the library, or you can call the museum, and they'll get in touch with one of us. But I sure appreciate your coming in.
All right.
I've enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Thank you.
We have been trying to find someone that's skilled at video editing, and doing all the upgrading and stuff. But so far we haven't pulled that off.